So, following the release of the Fantastic Four movie, you have this along with the Superman movie, both being superhero movies in the summer. And not only that, but you have them releasing in the same 2 week period. So, there's really no question that both of these movies are going to be compared, let alone the ongoing rivalry between DC and Marvel. So, I wanted to break both of these films down and ultimately give my opinion on what I think is the better film. So, breaking these down in 5 different categories here, starting with the visual component, I did think both of these movies have a few minor CGI problems, but that's really just being nitpicky. I do think that Superman does look good for the majority of the film, and I did like the aesthetic. However, I do think Fantastic Four is just the better looking movie overall. I thought that the retro futurism setting worked both in terms of the cinematography and for the plot. And I really thought a lot of the outer space scenes were just so visually stunning. So I do think you have to give the definitive edge to Fantastic Four here. In terms of the plot, I'd say this was a lot closer for me. Superman had a strong start, an okay second act, and a below average third act. And I thought Fantastic Four had a little bit of a similar pattern, but I would say it didn't drop off quite as much as Superman did. And for Fantastic Four, I thought the ending was effective, but I do think there were a few things that were a little bit rushed in terms of the overall climax and resolution. So I probably would have to give this a tie. But in terms of the acting, and again, while I don't think the acting in Superman is bad by any means, I just thought Fantastic Four was a step above. I thought the chemistry between Reed and Sue was much better than Lois and Clark, and I thought the chemistry between the whole Fantastic Four team was well done. And even for some of the supplemental or the villain roles, I really did like the Silver Surfer in this. And I thought the voice of Galactus was excellent. So I do think that Fantastic Four takes this area here confidently as well. In terms of the dialogue, I felt that Fantastic Four also presented a much more believable environment. Maybe you have a little bit of a stylistic difference or a tone difference between these two movies because Superman did lean heavily on a lot of humor. But at the same time, I just thought that some of the dialogue was a little too superficial for me. And even though Fantastic Four is also a fantasy sci-fi superhero film, I did think it was just a little bit more believable in terms of the overall interactions between characters. And I think this, compared to even some of the other categories, is where Fantastic Four stands out clearly. So it would take the clear edge here. And in terms of the overall world building, I would say both films served as reboots or revampings for each franchise, even though Marvel's revamp might come a little bit later in terms of the news of recasting certain characters. I still think Fantastic Four still served as a major stepping stone, as this was arguably the biggest Marvel release since Endgame, since it does set up the next Avengers movies. And in comparison to Superman, I thought both movies did provide a pretty interesting environment for future developments, and I'm pretty interested to see more of each. So I probably would have to give this area a tie as well. So all in all, I don't really think there's anything that Superman does better than Fantastic Four. Again, you do have some areas that are tied, but in others, I think Fantastic Four clearly stands out as the better movie. And to give a rating of both films, I would have Superman as a 7 out of 10, but I would have Fantastic Four as an 8.8 out of 10. And even for something like the world building in terms of the movie itself, I still think you have to give credit to the MCU and Fantastic Four because you have even minor details such as the mid-credit scene in Fantastic Four that is going to create a lot of buzz for the future of the MCU, where you just don't have that for Superman, which I do think was a little bit of a missed opportunity. And in terms of what's lined up for both franchises, in terms of future projects, it does look like Marvel is going to continue to dominate if the DCU is doing spin-offs for the next few years, while the MCU is going to have Doomsday and Secret Wars lined up. But in terms of the box office, I think that's going to be an interesting comparison to see how both of these movies do. But besides Fantastic Four clearly being the better film, I thought both films here are clearly passing grades for me. And I still think Superman does enough to be a successful movie. And I think it is great that you can have two good releases in a short time frame for the whole genre here. But feel free to let me know your thoughts on each of these movies, and I'll see you later.